Hi and welcome to Animation Deconstructed. My name is Shul Gonsalves, and in today's video we're going to be looking at how to work with compositions and footage. Jumping straight in, let's just start with importing some video. So I'm going to double click in this project panel and I'm going to bring in this drone shot of the hiker. And After Effects does all the hard work for us with video. Let's just take a look at the settings of this video so we know what we're looking at. It's a 1920 by 1080p sized video. It's 25 frames per second. It is 22 seconds and 7 frames long. There's nothing more we need to do over here except maybe just organize our project panel. So at the bottom here, we've got this button, which is our folder button, and I'm just going to call this video, press enter, and it's just good housekeeping. So if we twirl it down, we've got our videos in there. The next thing I want to bring in is some image or a bunch of images. So let's just double click. I have this folder over here and double click to go in. We can either bring in just one by double clicking it, or we can marquee select everything, or we can shift select and select a few, or we could go back into the folder before and just import the entire folder. Now if I drop this down, you'll see we've got all our images from that folder in After Effects. The next type of file that I want to look at is bringing in an image sequence. So I've got this PNG sequence of a frog jumping. If I just scroll down, it's quite a few frames. I can just select the first one. What you want to make sure is that you've got the sequence button selected. This could say JPEG sequence, PNG sequence, even a PSD sequence, Photoshop sequence. So just make sure that tick box is on and double click on the first frame. It'll bring in the entire sequence. If I just drop this down onto a composition, I can show you that that entire sequence is imported. Something you want to note with bringing in sequences, you have to know what that PNG sequence frame rate was, because it automatically is going to set whatever your preferences say to that PNG sequence. Now, my preferences are set to 30 frames per second. I can change this if I knew it was 25 frames per second just by either right-clicking, going Interpret Footage, Main, or coming down to this button over here, clicking it. Now we come over here and it says assume this frame rate is 30 frames per second. I could change that to 25 if I liked. I'm going to leave this at 30 because that is what it was. And click OK. I'm also just going to get rid of this footer, this composition, so that we've just got the PNG sequence. If you're working in a studio that works with a certain frame rate all the time, let's say they work with 29.97 or 30 frames per second or 25, you can set this up in After Effects just in the preferences. Just go to your edit menu, go down to preferences, and find the import selection. And right over here, sequence footage, you want to change this value right here to whatever your studio or whatever you're working with is. And press OK. The next type of file I want to look at is Photoshop files. Let's just go back here and I've got this Photoshop file here. There are several options when you're bringing in Photoshop files. So let's just double click it and see what happens. We get this pop-up and we've got many options on this drop down right here. Let's just go straight to footage. Now what footage will do is it is going to either merge everything together like a poster that's just flattened, almost like you're in Photoshop, selected all your layers and went flatten image, and that is what merge layers means. If we just go OK, you'll see it's just one layer and everything is flattened. Let's just Control Z that. Try again. We can also choose a layer. So let's say we only want one layer from that PSD file. I know that this is my text layer from that Photoshop file, and we've got two kind of options here: merge layer styles into footage and ignore layer styles. To keep it consistent with your Photoshop file, just keep it on merge layer styles into footage. And then the footage dimensions, this is up to you how you want this to come out. You can either choose layer size, which means it's going to crop your layer. If I double click that, you can see it's cropped the layer to the size of the content. If I just go back and I try that again and I select the same thing but choose document size, you will see that this layer is now the document size as opposed to the content size. This is a personal preference and however you want to work with your files. There are pros and cons to both, and through some tutorials I'm going to show you those pros and cons when working with text and building complex animations. Let's go through the other options. So let's say you want to bring in your Photoshop file, you want all the layers, all the layer styles, everything. Let's go down from footage into composition. You can see we can keep the editable layer styles. I like to keep it on that check, just because I like to be able to turn off or edit the drop shadows, bevels, or anything else that has been created in Photoshop. You'll see we have composition, retain layers, sizes. So let's just go OK here so that I can explain it with a visual. If we double click this composition that's already created, you'll see we can see our guides, we can see everything else. If I select this text again, you can see that this is the option where it keeps every layer to the composition size, the canvas in Photoshop. If I Control Z that and just try once more, and we select composition, retain layer sizes, and go OK. We go into that composition and now we can see that everything is cropped to be as small as the layer that it needed. I can just turn off that levels layer and you can see we've got all the other layers. Turn that back on. Something else we see in the timeline panel is that we've got a composition within a composition, and this is known as nested compositions. I like to be able to explain this in an easier way, and the kind of concept that I use is in Photoshop you have folders, so this is exactly that. This is a folder in Photoshop, and if we double click this we can go in there and see our other layers in that folder. There's a highlight, there's a bevel layer, and there's a color layer at the back. If I just twirl this down, you can see that we have our layer styles as we said we would want it. I'm going to go down to bevel and emboss, and we've got all the attributes like we have in Photoshop. I'm just going to take the size up so that we have more of a ball, and we can jump back into the other composition just by selecting it in the timeline panel, and you'll see it's updated in this composition. So the next thing I want to do is just clean this up. So I'm going to create a folder called PSD. I'm going to drag the composition and the folder into the PSD folder. I'm just going to drag this into images. And something else I like to do personally, but other people find it a waste of time, is I like to just change these colors so I can see it quicker when my project is getting more complex. So bringing in Illustrator Files is the next thing I want to do, and it gives us the exact same options. I've got an Illustrator file right here, but there is one issue with Illustrator. So I'm just going to open my Illustrator document and show you. In order to see the layers, we need them to be on separate layers but ungrouped and not in folders. So you can't have this sun coupled with the sky in a folder. This will essentially be one layer and it will be flattened, so you cannot move the sun. I'm just going to Control Z that. And let's double click this. You'll see we've got all the same options that we had before. Composition, and you can choose document size, layer size. I'm just going to go OK with layer size. We can just double click on this composition, Sunset Beach, and you can see all of our layers that we had in our Illustrator document are there. One other thing I want to point out before moving on is that in Photoshop and Illustrator we had these two text layers. And because we know that they're live text, we should be able to edit them. But right now they're just flattened graphics. And what we can do to bring this back to life, like it's saying, bring me to life, is we can right click on the layer, go to create and convert to editable text. Now you can see that layer has changed to a text layer. Just note that this is not updating your Photoshop file. This is literally just information within After Effects, and if we take a look inside the PSD, we still have a Photoshop layer. Let's just update this text quickly. I am alive. Our layer from Photoshop is not updating, and I can drop that in over there. Okay, so I'm going to just close up this PSD, and the last thing I want to show how to bring in is sounds, and that's pretty easy. Go to our assets. I have this short sound over here. Just double click and After Effects will bring in everything and do everything else for you, just like video. And all you need to do is drop that down on your timeline and it'll place it. This is only 7 seconds long, so we could bring our workspace down and zoom right in. Okay, so that covers bringing in files, but what about creating a blank composition, a new composition? Let's just come down here and select create a new composition, and let's go over what the settings are. We can type in a name here, so I'm just going to type new animation. Over here you can select a preset from a whole bunch of sizes and frame rates, or you can customize yours to your liking. I just have 1280 by 720. You'll want to keep your pixel aspect ratio to square pixels almost 100% of the time. This is what modern video plays at with square pixels. If you drop this down, you'll see some of these old kind of television set settings. Frame rate, I want mine to be 30 frames per second. You'll want to find out what you are animating for. If you're in a studio, what they are looking for, what frame rate they need for their systems. If you're animating for YouTube or personal, anything from 25 frames, 30 frames, or even 60 frames per second will work perfectly. Resolution, this is the same drop down that we know we have over here. So it's just initially going to start on full, and you can change it as you go. Start time code is set to 0, and you can change that, but I like to just start everything on 0 so that I know when my timeline is at the beginning, it's on 0, and I move forward from there. Duration, what we're looking at here is hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. And let's just say we want to make a composition that is 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. Easiest way to do that is to say, okay, 2, use your full stop or your point key, 30, point, and you don't need to put the frames in if you don't have any specific frames, as long as you put that full stop there. If I hit the tab key, you'll see it updates and fills in the rest. The background color I'm going to leave to black. That is my preference, and that's how I like to work. I'm going to press OK, and we can see our new composition is over there. It is 2 minutes and 30 seconds long. It is 30 frames per second, and everything else is set. Once you have created it, this is not set in stone. You can always go back and edit this composition and the settings. So the way that we want to do that is, with it selected, we can go to composition, composition settings, and we can change that at any time. We can say we only want 30 seconds, 30 and a point, and you'll see everything updates straight away. And that is basically everything you need to know about bringing files in and creating a composition. If you found this useful, please hit the like button and subscribe. I will be releasing videos every week, sharing everything that I've learned over the last decade working as an animator. Thank you, and until next time.